Okay, it's January 8th, 2020. We're here today with Paul Donnell, an early computer programmer and technician and technologist, largely at IBM in the 1960s. Paul, welcome and thank you for coming in today.
You're very welcome.
Could you tell us a little bit about your early life, where you grew up, what your folks did, that kind of thing?
I was born in Chicago, Illinois. My mother worked for a defense industry or Western Electric. Okay. After the war, my family moved, or part of my family moved to rural Michigan. And that's where I remember a lot of my history is in rural Michigan. But prior to that, I lived in a rather modest, shall we say, modest neighborhood in Chicago.
When you lived in the rural area, was that close to Chicago?
About 140 miles.
Oh, okay. What was the name of the town?
It was rural Grand Junction, Michigan.
Wonderful. And what did your folks do there? Were they farmers or?
I lived with my grandparents, and he was a farmer. Yeah, we farmed that little 40 acres in southwestern Michigan.
Wow. Did you help out on the farm?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. At what ages would you have been there helping on the farm? What years?
Years.
Yeah.
That would have been 1950 to 1952.
Okay, and how old would you have been?
I graduated high school from Bloomingdale High School a month before my 18th birthday.
And
So
that was
1950.
1950.
Uh-huh.
Great. Okay. And so you worked on the farm for a couple of years after high school.
Yes, I did. But I immediately enrolled in Western Michigan University that fall
Okay. Tell
of
us about
1952.
that. Tell us about that.
Well, it was a typical kind of college, initially a teacher college, and I wasn't certain about the curriculum I was going to pursue. So I started out in engineering and got a math minor, but my education was interrupted because of financial difficulty and other reasons, and I worked at odd jobs for a year or so in the Chicago area, and finally finished my degree in 1956.
Wonderful. And now I want to flip back just a little bit to your early school years. We'll get to your college a bit later, but when you were growing up, did you have any special interests or hobbies, or did you like sports, those kind of things? Or?
Because I went to a real small rural school in southwestern Michigan. My final 2 years, I was on the basketball team, but it was such a small school community that there wasn't much else. There was just baseball and basketball. There wasn't even football or swimming or anything like that.
Did you have hobbies when you were growing up?
I would say no. No, I didn't have. I just liked to play. I liked music. I liked listening to music.
Oh, great. Yeah. Any favorites, the music that you like?
I think I developed an interest in jazz. But incidentally, growing up, getting ready for school throughout high school, my grandfather would have on the country western stations. And I picked up a lot of country western tunes. just by memory, of
Yes,
course.
yes. Well, that's wonderful. So, how would you describe school, both at middle school and high school?
Well,
Excuse me. Would you describe those as happy times, or?
yes, I would describe it as happy times. Even though it was a little tiny, nearly all white school, um, I was well received and enjoyed my time there.
Right. Now, tell us a little bit about that and being an African American in a school where everyone else is white.
I don't know if there's anything that stands out. You know, I don't think there was anything that stands out. I just enjoyed myself and liked the other kids for the most part.
Good, good. Did you have any mentors in high school?
No,
No, not at all.
mentors.
No.
Seemed like to me that's something that came a lot later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. Not like a friendly coach or a or a math teacher or something like that.
I think I understand what you're trying to ask. No, everybody was treated the same.
Okay. Right. Now, did the background of the Korean War affect you at all? Were you concerned about being drafted, for example, maybe a little later for the Vietnam War?
My mother expressed the opinion, expressed that she had the desire not for me to go to the Korean War, and I think that helped her enthusiasm for getting me enrolled in college because funds are limited, very limited, but she thought by going to college I would not probably be going to the Korean War. Although in 1952, that was the year it was also ended, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But who knew that at the time, right?
Right.
So
I didn't pay attention to news at the time. I wasn't concerned myself about going.
right. Okay. That's good.
Yeah, but my mother was.
And did your dad was he affected at all by either Korean War or World War II or?
My dad was out of the picture very early in my life, so.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone in, say, public life that you admired growing up as a youngster, like could be an athlete or a movie star or someone from history?
I can't think of anyone. I can't think of anyone.
Okay, no problem. Now, so let's flip back. You went to Western Michigan University,
Yes, I did.
and you got a master's there.
Yes.
Wonderful. In computer science or what?
Oh.
They didn't call it that, I don't think, right?
They didn't call it that. I think the degree of computer science, I'm not sure what was the first institution that gave out that degree, but it certainly wasn't Western. And it was, I seemed like to me, had been working some time before I even heard of the fact that there was a computer science degree.
Oh, yes. Right. I think it was in the early 60s, actually, that,
Early 60s.
yeah, that the first degree officially in computer science was awarded. It was probably MIT or something like that. Well, tell us about your experience with computers. Like, at Western Michigan, did you have any experience with computers?
No.
They didn't have them there? Or?
What did they have there? I don't recall any instruments called computers there. I don't recall encountering anything like that at Western.
Now, when you had to do calculations for your degree, which I guess you did, you probably had to take physics and math and those kind of. How did you do calculations?
Oh, pen and paper or pencil and paper.
Okay, maybe a slide rule too? Or?
Oh yeah, of course, slide rule.
Right.
I don't remember even having the handheld calculators.
Right. Yeah, those came much later.
Yeah, much later.
Yeah, they had the big desktop mechanical calculators, the big rows, row and row, row upon row of buttons on them. Yeah. So, well, then when was the first time you saw a computer?
The first time I saw a computer was when I had what is called a computer. The forerunner to computers are electronic accounting machines. And I actually began working for the Department of Agriculture using electronic accounting machines. This Department of Agriculture office also had a computer. It was a tube type 650.
Oh, yes.
And that was my first introduction to computers, was a tube 650. And I was working my position there was an electronic accounting machine operator. Although they had this 650. An opening developed for an operator for the 650 because nobody else wanted to work third shift. And that gave me an opportunity. I gladly volunteered to work third shift to be acquainted with computers. Now, they also had 1401s. So I had the 650 and I think a 1401 also.
Right. Now, for excuse me, for people who may not know, third shift is from midnight to 8. Is that
12
right?
to 8.
12 to 8. Yeah.
Basically 12 to 8.
So of course most people are sleeping, but but that's great. That's when a lot of the most amazing computer science in history has been done. At 3 in the morning. And what kind of jobs were you tasked with running on the 650? What kind of
just mainly operator, not a programmer,
Okay.
just an operator.
Right. So people would submit jobs through punch cards, I guess, or
I'm trying to recall. I don't remember those details.
Okay, no problem. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the 650 is a real computer, and a serious
Yes.
computer. And there's a famous computer scientist called Knuth. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he works at Stanford. He's a professor there, and he wrote a series of books that are very famous called The Art of Computer Programming.
Mm-hmm.
He actually dedicated that book
To the 650?
to the 650 because that was his first computer too at Carnegie Tech, it was called at the time. Yeah. So that's a great experience you share in common. The 650 is a wonderful machine to start on. Did you have to take a training course to learn how to operate it, or?
No, I didn't. As I recall, there were just simple functions that I had to perform, like loading cards and stuff like that, but just simple functions that I had to perform.
Right. Did you have any interesting, memorable events, like the computer went haywire or it shut down, or anything interesting like that happen, or was it pretty reliable?
I think there were times when the computer was down, but that was pretty infrequent, and I don't remember too much about that, except that there was times when it had to be maintained.
Right, absolutely, yeah. And did you know the other computer operators from the other shifts?
Not very well. And I can barely remember only one person, and I don't even remember his name.
Right, Yeah, because you didn't really overlap very much. So I could see that, why that would be. Um, and can you describe the experience, the campus experience at Western Michigan, like, especially for people of color? Was it welcoming or not? Uh,
Um, we were talking about 60 years here.
I know, I
Um,
know.
I don't remember any bad experience, bad experiences. The only thing that I remember is that I think I enjoyed the social life. Let's say too much.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. That
I
sounds good.
appreciate that.
That's good. Now, let's see. You said what year did you graduate? Western Michigan. That would have been '56, I think.
I finished my last year in '56, and I was a little short a degree, and I was finally awarded a degree in actually '62, I think.
Wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful. So, tell us about your first job. You mentioned the agriculture department. Was that your first job?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Well, I had worked for the post office department, postal service. I was a mail carrier. What else? And that was it. I started out in civil service jobs, and I went from civil service to IBM.
Right. Now, tell us a bit about how you got hired on to IBM. What was that process like?
First of all, I met this person in Chicago. Oh, let me digress a little bit.
Absolutely.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. One of my coworkers was a lady who asked me to escort her niece that was coming to Chicago to go to Sherwood Music School. I said, sure. Okay. And I met her niece, and I proposed a couple of years later, and we were married a couple of years later. But she wanted to live. She was from San Jose, California. Oh, her niece lived in San Jose, California, and was coming to Chicago to go to Sherwood Music School. Okay. Once we were married, she wanted to move back to San Jose. I agreed. I was able to get a civil service transfer to the Social Security Department in San Francisco. And I began working at the Social Security Department, again as a computer operator, and at 1401. And it was at that time that I noticed an advertisement for IBM, and I applied. And I'm not sure of the relationship or what came first, but that job or that interview was set up by an organization called the Urban League. And that's how I got the interview, and that's when I was hired.
Wonderful. And then did you, so what year would this have been again?
This was 1965.
65.
Uh-huh.
And IBM San Jose then at Cottle Road, is that where you worked? Or?
Yes, it was. The particular office was the Los Gatos office, but yeah, essentially San Jose.
Right. Now that's a very large facility.
It was. It sure was.
For IBM. How did you feel? Did you feel welcome working there? Did they help you accomplish your goals, personal goals, career
I
goals, and that?
I felt very welcome.
Mm,
I felt very welcome. And I enjoyed my work and everything.
mm. Well, tell us. This brings us back to the start of the story, which was a bit started when your daughter Nancy sent us that photo of you in front of a 360, right, with some panels off, and he was asking me, what kind of machine do you think this is, right? And I didn't know. I mean, it's like some kind of 360, I think. And do I have that right, Nancy?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe, have you seen that picture?
The photograph?
Yeah.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Right. So why don't you tell us, if there is a story to that photo, tell us the story of it and maybe connect to what you were doing at IBM generally.
All right.
Yeah.
My position at that time was a computer operator. I wasn't hired initially as a programmer. I was a computer operator, and the photograph was, how do you explain it? It was, I'm trying to say, like a publicity
Right.
or something to publish a picture of somebody working at a computer.
Okay, sure. Yeah, marketing kind of picture.
Yeah, for that photograph, I don't think I was actually performing a task.
Right.
It was made to look like I was performing a task
Right.
at that time. I'm not sure what the photograph was for.
Okay. Well, so what did you do when you were at? Were you operating IBM's internal systems? Is that essentially
Yes.
what your job was there?
That's correct.
Yeah, and 65. So we've got 1401s and 360s maybe coming on board.
But I didn't understand that.
Oh, I'm sorry. In 1965, you would have been working with 1401s and 360s, maybe.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I hadn't thought about it, but prior to working with a 650, I was working with a 1401.
Right.
That was with the Social Security Department, Civil Service Social Security Department. When immediately upon hiring with IBM, I was working with 360s, I believe. Yeah.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
The time-wise. And that's a wonderful story about meeting your wife, too. Thank you for sharing that story. And let's see here. Just going to... okay. Just tell us briefly when you left IBM.
Oh,
When did
when
you
I
leave?
left IBM?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it was personal computers were being introduced, and that change had been, had been initiated, and I was in my 50s, and a buyout was presented, and I took advantage of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess they thought maybe the mainframe was being competing with PCs now, and they might not need as many operators.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mainframes have been around. I think they're still around.
Yes. Yeah.
Mainframes are still around.
Yeah. Very true. In fact, the modern mainframes that IBM builds today can still run 360 code.
Really?
Yeah.
You mean there might be some of my code still?
It's entirely possible. Yeah.
It
really
that's
is.
gratifying to know.
That's great. Okay, now, so you left, it sounds like 81, 82, something like that? You left IBM in about 1982?
No, I left IBM in, I think it was 91.
Oh, 91. Okay, good. Right. So I got it now. Now, when you worked there, did you work as part of a team? Were there?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So.
Well,
Yeah.
you were part of a team. The programming that you did, was part of another component or subcomponent.
Now you're mentioning programming now, whereas before you said you were an operator. Are you starting to do programming now?
Let's see, I can't remember the year, but IBM offered classes for programming, and I took the programming class and passed, and they hired me as a programmer, reclassified me as a programmer.
Okay,
Yeah.
very interesting. Now tell us a bit about that kind of work. What were you doing? Was it system level stuff?
Well, the organization that I was part of supported peripheral equipment that was at the main plant. Mostly, when I say peripheral equipment, it was mainly disk drives. Exactly. So the operating system had to be modified to accommodate the various changes brought about by new disk drives and their variations. And so that was the programming that I supported, I think, nearly throughout all my IBM career.
Wow, so that's an incredibly important. Basically, you're putting in the hooks in the operating system to be able to connect to the disk drives. And,
yeah.
Well, that's amazing. And San Jose, of course, was
disk drive manufacturer.
Was a huge, probably IBM's biggest disk drive. Is it fair to say that disk drive plant?
I think there's 7,000 or 8,000 people at one time.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
That might be a little bit high, but
Yeah.
it was at least 4,000 to 5,000 people.
Yeah. Amazing. So were there? Did IBM make any efforts to? It sounds like they offered courses. Did they offer any specific efforts for people of color at IBM?
I don't recall any.
Okay.
Yeah, anything they offered was open to anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody who wanted to take classes.
Anything they could have done better, IBM?
They could have done better.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything. I don't recall with any of my colleagues ever complaining or saying this happened or that happened. I think if there was a complaint, it was strictly due to the peculiarities or particulars of their assignment.
Right. It was on a technical issue, probably.
Yeah.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. So let me see. This is flipping up a little bit to look at all of computing, the whole field of computing. Everybody that's working in it. Do you think we could do a better job of attracting people of color into computing, and how could we do that?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I don't know what the situation is at this point.
It's pretty low. It's about like 9%.
9%?
Yeah.
That's pretty close to
for African Americans.
the population.
Okay.
That's well, 11% or something like that of the U.S. population.
Right.
Now, different cities have different percentages.
Sure. Right. Okay. Let's see now. We're almost wrapping up now. I actually wanted to ask you a little bit about the 370, if you worked on that machine at all. IBM 370? System 370 came after 360?
To be honest with you, I don't recall exactly when there was a transition from 360 to 370.
Right.
I think it had to be in my latter years there.
It was about 69 or 70 initially, but then they had other models that ran the 370 operating systems, like the 4381 and other. They stopped calling them. There was no 380 or 390. There was a 390 actually, System 390. Anyway, we're getting confused. That's fine if you don't recall.
Well, let me say this. When I kind of sync on operating systems, and of course, first there was OS, and then there was
DOS, DOS, maybe.
No, I never worked on a DOS system.
No,
Never. But I was trying to think of I can't remember the acronym, but it had to do with multifunction fixed task. MFT, I think.
Yeah, MFT, yeah.
MFT.
Right.
And then, of course, after MFT was MVS, I believe. And I'm not sure what the follow-on to that was.
As you saw these operating systems come out, because you were there from the very start of 360, did you notice any particular features of how IBM produced software? Like, was it, I'll be more specific, when the first OS came out, for example, it had a lot of problems, and it took quite a while to iron out. Even like customers had the machine for a couple of years before they really got a good OS for it. And I guess Fred Brooks.
There was a maintenance department. And
Yeah.
Yeah. And what we call,
Software maintenance.
yes, software maintenance.
Right.
Okay, there's another term I'm trying to think of that escapes me at the moment.
Right. I think I know what you mean. Yeah, and so you were charged with supporting some of the operating system, the disk related parts of
That's correct.
all these operating systems. Right. Interesting. And did you have to acquire any hardware knowledge, by the way, when you?
No,
No?
I'm completely software, never any hardware knowledge.
Oh, okay. So when you were writing software for these hard drives, they would just tell you, this is the way it is. You don't need to know what's below this layer, like what's going on at the hardware level so much. But because there are some connections, like sometimes you have to write code, little timing loops and stuff like that because of hardware.
Will you repeat that question?
Yes, I'm just saying, let me reformulate it. When you're writing software for these peripherals, the DASDs, I guess, right? The disk drives, how much information, how many people were on the team to support that?
For the whole, it was called the data management area. And I think that must consisted of maybe 36 people.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they were doing much of what you were doing, the same kind of things?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct.
Did you have any interaction with IBM on the East Coast, like Poughkeepsie or Endicott, or?
Rarely. Rarely.
Right. Did you ever have to go back
Yes,
east?
yes, I did. As a matter of fact, I've had a couple of trips back there.
Yeah, tell us about those.
Well, the exact reason for going back east, I think I'm not sure about the exact reason. I think it was because that's where the operating system was developed, and I think the trip was made to probably sync ourselves with the changes that were coming down. That's what I think. Coincidentally, one interesting thing that happened. My wife is a CPA, and she worked for Xerox. They sent her around the country too at different locations. One time, we were in the same city. I think New York, and IBM had sent me to New York for. I'm sorry, I forget the reason,
Right.
but I found out where my wife's hotel was, and I surprised her one evening. I knocked on the hotel door and surprised her.
That's good. I'm sure she was surprised.
Yeah.
That's great. Now, and in terms of a career, are you happy you chose this as a career? What else would you have done?
Well,
If you could start all over again, what would you do?
really can't imagine doing anything else. There was the satisfaction of a very interesting job. Yeah, it was not boring at all. It was very satisfactory, very satisfying, and I enjoyed my work. I enjoyed going to work, and I really can't imagine doing anything else, really. Yeah, I really can't. And if I were to think about putting myself back at that time, I can't think of any other field that maybe education. I can't think of anything else.
Now, if you had to give advice to kids these days,
Uh-huh.
what would you tell them?
Well, I
Let's say kids who are interested in computers.
sorry.
Let me. Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Well,
what
if they're interested, that covers a pretty wide field, and there's different, there's different parts of it that they might prefer over the other parts. But that's a pretty wide field these days, very wide. There's the hardware or engineering, physical engineering part of it, and then there's the programming part. I would advise them to do the. I think the programming part is more exciting. Software is more exciting than hardware. I'm not sure about that, but I've never worked in hardware. But I would recommend software because you get to create. Well, in hardware, I guess you discover more than create, or I'm not sure but it's like an art to create a program to accomplish a task. Yeah.
Thank you. What were just before we wrap it up here? What was the longest program you ever? The biggest. Most challenging program you had to work on?
For one period, a short period, I worked for Federal Systems Division. Now that was very interesting because that division that I worked for, or that group that I worked for, processed telemetry data from satellites. And I remember a program that I wrote to convert the telemetry data from this one corporation, I forget the name of it, to something that IBM used. And I thought that was a very interesting assignment that I accomplished.
Yes, and since you mentioned Federal Systems Division, FSD, did you work on Apollo at all, or any of the space stuff?
It was a satellite and satellite telemetry data. I'm not sure of what else.
Okay.
Not sure, because that was very secret too.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
So,
Is there anything you'd like to say before we wrap up?
in our email, I mentioned that coincidentally, I had met with another group of IBMers, black IBMers, and I did mention to them that I was going to be interviewed by a curator for the Computer History Museum. And I asked them, was anything they wanted me to say? And everybody shook their head, no, nothing. They did want me to mention back in the early days that they encountered housing discrimination.
Okay. Can you
That's
tell?
the only thing I could elicit from them.
And in San Jose?
San Jose.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's well known. There are covenants that people had, and it's a shameful chapter.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for bringing that up. That's valuable.
But
to
there
know.
was not, I would say there was general contentment
Right.
and satisfaction for their job and everything else.
Yeah. And IBM is a pretty solid company, so
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear they treated their employees well.
I
good.
would say very well.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
Well, I had hesitated about the coming because I didn't think I had much to contribute because everything was just kind of normal.
Yeah, but that's part of the story as well.
Okay.
It really is. Yeah. So, well, thank you so much for
You're
coming.
very
We
welcome.
love having you here.
You're very welcome.
Yeah.